What's happening, everyone? This is another Adventure Box podcast, and I am Zach Edwards, your host. Thanks to the Historical Conquest, our sponsor of this program. They're the ones that bring to you the Adventure Box podcast and the great game of Historical Conquest, which is like a mixture of Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, with the gameplay of Risk, but where every card is historically based. That's why it's so much fun. So we actually have 70% fun and just a little bit of learning. But the more you play it, the more you'll learn it, and the more you'll retain the information that you're learning in school or you learned in school. Bringing back all this information that you might have learned at some point, and then you'll be able to remember it. So we do this for fun. We do this as a business, but we do this as fun because Historical Conquest is just fun. Games are just fun. When you get the right game, adding history to it just makes it even better. Okay, so let's go into today's topic, and that is the English exploration of America. Now, and the Americas being North America, South America, Central America, except the English mostly put all their effort on North America. Why? Because it was directly west of England, so it was a lot easier for them to travel. And did you know that the Spanish, when they came over, they either had to come down to Africa and then straight over from there, because Brazil and Africa are the closest 2 points. If they floated straight across like Columbus did, it took you like two weeks more just to travel across the wider expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. But if you came from England, you went straight over to Canada, and it was a straight shot right across, or even down to North America a little bit. You had a little bit more time, but it was great. I have a beef to talk about this morning. Okay, so I was looking for a map. I didn't expect that I would actually have to make my own maps, because I thought there would be great maps on the internet, right? The internet has everything you want. Baloney. It is totally baloney. So this is the map that they gave me for the European explorers and where they went. I was like, are you serious? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 explorers? There were 100 ships at least that came across from Europe over to the Americas. And when it came to explorers, there were dozens of them, not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're done, or even 6 because you count Cortez, 7 if you count Francisco Coronado. Pizarro is down in South America. You got 8. You got 8. We've already covered at least a dozen ever since we started this. Just, 2 weeks? We've already talked about at least a dozen different explorers. Specifically, we started with only 4. We started, I think, 3 during the time of Columbus, the early explorations. Then last week, we covered another 5 main ones, and then added a few more we talked about. And then we also talked about, because we talked about more than just coming across the ocean, in the chance that it says like Cortez and Pizarro down in Incas. What about the Mayas? What about those that traveled circumnavigated, we've already talked about, or those that traveled around Africa? The maps on the internet are pathetic. I'm sorry, it's true. I hate saying words of the word stupid, the S word in our house. We don't say that word. Dumb, we try not to say. There are better words for it. But the lack of really good maps on the internet, it's really bad. And yes, there might be some good ones, but they're deep in there. So let's go through some of the maps that we do have. This one, almost forget it. Except there is one thing that can be shown from here. So because this week we're going to be talking about the European, mostly of course, the European explorers, because that's what we've been talking about. But the English explorers, you do have Henry Hudson. You do have John Cabot. You have, wait a second. This is actually from France. And we will be talking about it. But it's like Jacques Cartier. Jacques Cartier. Again, I butcher all these names. Sorry. It's just, yeah. I'll find the right pronunciation. I'll let you know when we get to that unit. But that's a French one. So we have Henry Hudson. who actually worked with the Netherlands, but also worked for England. John Cabot. Then we have Sir Walter Raleigh, and that's the one. That's one of the two we're going to be talking about today. So, who was the first to circumnavigate the globe? Can you remember? I'm pretty sure you can remember. Who was the first person to? Oops, that's my cheat sheet. That's actually my schedule. Who was the first to circumnavigate the globe? Okay, so we know that. Let's see. There was Christopher Columbus, founded islands in the Caribbean. John Cabot, who we actually talked about we talked about earlier, but you see in the map. We've talked about Amerigo Vespucci. We've talked about Pedro Alvarez Cabral, who went over to Brazil and then cut around Africa and such. And then we had Juan Ponce de Leon, who traveled over to the islands and then traveled up to Florida and explored part of Florida. Last week we talked about, this is the one I was talking about. What was his name? His name was, if you haven't remembered yet, his name is Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan was the explorer that was the first to circumnavigate the globe. He went around South America and then over. Now remember, he never made it completely. His men did on one ship, the only ship that was left, but he was the one given credit for circumnavigating the globe. Today we're going to be talking about somebody else that did, and his name is Sir Francis Drake. Now, Sir Francis Drake is a very interesting character. Very interesting for the fact that he wasn't always a good guy. He was a downright, in our eyes, we would say evil. And yet not. And I'll talk about this. So let's start off with Sir Francis Drake. Okay. So again, we're going to be talking about Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Francis Drake, who was he? Okay. Born in England. He was the eldest son of how many kids? 12 kids. Actually, I don't even know how many kids they had. They had 12 sons, but they were farmers, and so they used their children to help them on the farm, and then they grew to create other farms or go off and do different things. Sir Francis Drake was a little bit different. He was an explorer. He wanted to take off. He wanted to go explore new things. So he actually left with his cousin, Sir John. I love these Sir names. That is because they were knighted. All of these that were these famous people, you know them mostly because they were knighted for the things that they had accomplished. Henry Hudson, I don't think he was a Sir, but we're going to find that out coming up. We're not going to go there yet. So around 1540 is when Sir Francis Drake was born. Around 1560, he started discovering the ocean and wanting to go out and explore. Well, he also went out with Sir John Hawkins, who is his cousin, and started to play a part in what? The transatlantic trade. Not just any transatlantic trade, the transatlantic slave trade. So he went down into Africa, collected slaves, and then came over to the Caribbean and sold them. Okay, so this is where people would say, definitely in this age, he was evil for selling slaves, selling people into society. Again, we can't look at history from our eyes to understand history. To understand it, we have to be able to see it from their eyes. To be able to understand how it affects our lives, that's when we can see it with our lens. So, he was a person that saw slaves, as a commodity. Now, again, these were not just Africans. These were Middle Eastern. These were Christians. These were all the different people that were in the slave trade in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. All these trades were traded around. All these people were traded around, all these slaves. One of the big things to understand is that when they went to the market, there were Christian slaves there, and there were African slaves there. There were Middle Eastern slaves there. So they, being Europeans, if they were part of the Catholic Church, they were mandated that they could not sell Christians into slavery. So if they were coming down to buy slaves, to bring them over to the Americas, would they buy a Christian slave? I mean, you could buy Christian slaves and let them free, but they're business people that wanted to make some money. So they came down, They grabbed the slaves that they could, according to their I won't even say belief because it had nothing to do with their beliefs, to their ability culturally to do it. They grabbed the slaves, they brought them over to the Caribbean and sold them in the Caribbean. What happened from there? Okay, so that was the slave trade was somewhere in the early 1560s. Okay, so now you're leaving the Caribbean and you're coming back. Now you got a long voyage. You've got your money for selling the slaves, or you've got the commodities that you want, but you've got some extra storage on there. Like you have a ship that was supposed to carry slaves. Now you have commodities going back to Europe, and you have extra room. What do you do with that extra room? Well, if you have cannons, if you have cannons, you fire on other ships. You become what is it? It's a privateer, not a pirate. There's two differences. A privateer is someone that's allowed by a country, another country, such as Britain, to attack ships from, say, Spain. So if Spain was coming with supplies, you could attack them, or you could attack them as they're going back with gold and with other commodities that are coming from the New World. Going to be able to fill up your ships with more commodities that you did not have when you started. Yeah, it's almost a no-brainer for them. Yeah, let's attack some ships. Let's get some more commodities for going back to Europe, and let's become heroes with all the Spanish gold that they've been able to claim and ship back. So what did they do? They became privateers. Again, another instance where you'd say this person was evil. He was stealing. Well, technically he was stealing for another country, or at least partially for another country, because they padded their pockets quite well during these times. But they were commissioned by the British government to become privateers and to fight the Spanish for taking over the evil gold that they stole from other people and brought it back. And there's all this controversy around all these things. So, if you were back then, you might not have seen it the same way that we would see it. At the same time, stealing is always wrong. But if you're stealing from someone that stole before, I guess you can justify stealing it again. Not really, but that's how they justified it. So, again, we have Sir Francis Drake and Hawkins now in the Caribbean selling their slaves, coming back, and as they come back between 1567, they're in the Caribbean, and 1569, they're still in the Caribbean. The mission ended basically for their voyage to the Caribbean to attack the Spanish, ended in 1569. So if they're coming back, they've already attacked the Spanish, why not attack some more ships on the way home? So their privateering years were between 1570 and 1572. So 2 years they did this. What does that do? You come home with a lot of treasures, you're going to be pretty wealthy. Sir Francis Drake could probably buy his own ship at this point. So again, 1572, Drake led his own expedition that successfully captured Spanish treasure at a port called Nombre de Dios. And so he gained a reputation for his, well, this is interesting, his audacity, his outgoingness, his, I think we might be talking about Blackbeard, though he's not really in the curriculum. He really should be, but we haven't put him in there yet. But very outgoing, very in your face, scary at times. So he gets home. It's 1572. And between 1572 and 1577, 5 years, he doesn't really do anything. What's he doing during that years? There's a question, and there's no direct proof of this, but people like to say that this is what happened. The reason why he left being a privateer and selling slaves is because he had a change of heart. He said, you know what, I'm done with this. But he still had a love for the sea. So if he still has a love for the sea, what's he going to do? He's going to want to try to get back onto the sea. He already has a ship basically promised to him. So what's he do? Let me see. What would Queen Elizabeth say to this? Now, he was actually quite close with Queen Elizabeth. he was good friends with him, especially for the fact that he was able to bring back all this treasure and all these goods and fight against the Spanish for England. So he was pretty tight with the Queen. And so he went to the Queen and said, hey, I want to do something big. I want to be bigger than I am. What can I do? And I think they probably talked about it for a little bit and came to this point. They're like, you know what? There is talk of somebody else by the name of Ferdinand Magellan, Portuguese explorer. And he actually went around the world. Let's see if you can do the same. Now, this was actually 50 years before. So it was, again, September 20th, 1519, Magellan set sail. And his men made it there, I think, 2 years later. Made it back. Okay, so it's 1521, 1522, I think it was 1521, when he returns. And this is, again, Ferdinand Magellan, not Sir Francis Drake. Between then and 1577, when the English decide to commission Sir Francis Drake to go around, I'm wondering if there's anybody else that had gone around and circumnavigated the globe since that point. Because, I mean, it was a good, somewhat, I mean, it was a treacherous voyage for Ferdinand Magellan, of course. But it was a interesting way around. So let's do that. Now we're going to Google this. So let's see. Between Ferdinand Magellan and Sir Francis Drake. If I can type. Who else circumnavigated, if I can spell, the globe? Okay. I didn't even... Okay. So there's actually multiple ones that went. Okay, so the first one is actually on Ferdinand Magellan's list. So we'll neglect that. It was Ferdinand Magellan's voyage. It was just that the person that returned after Magellan died was given some credit too. His name was Juan Sebastian Elcano. But there's one that I've actually never really heard about, and I'm going to have to do some more studying on this. So the Spanish expedition aimed to follow Magellan's route to the Spice Island. His name was Garcia Joffre de Loaiza. Yeah, Loaiza. Okay, Garcia Joffre de Loaiza. He was actually going to do the same route. However, the majority of his fleet was lost, and his fleet survivors, including Elcano, which was from the first expedition, and Andrea de Urdaneta, made it back, effectively completing the second circumnavigation of the globe. But then between then, again, 1936 it took him. Oh, I never heard about that. Okay, so this one actually took him years to do. 1936. 1536. Wow. 1536 to 1577, no one else had navigated the globe, at least not on record. Okay, at least this is from what Google says. I very much could be wrong. As I said, the maps are horrible. So, at this point, who was navigating the globe? And actually, I'm missing out on showing you some of these great pictures I have. Okay, let's see. Next one. This is Sir Francis Drake. So he goes out and in 1577 tries to circumnavigate the globe. This is his route. So he leaves England, goes down below South America, and actually he gets like sidetracked on here. He went out to an island, found out it was too far away when he's going around the point of South America, and decides, you know what, I'm going to go back. So the Straits of Magellan, he decided he wanted to go west from there, hit some islands, found out it was too far out, so he came back to South America and traveled up the coast of South America, up the coast of North America, came away from the coast, and then came back around San Francisco area, and then San Francisco or Northern California, and then boom, took off, hit Hawaii, and made it over to the Philippines, much like Ferdinand Magellan, and went through those islands into, basically did not go to India. I think by that point they're like, we're done. Let's go. We're going home. And went over to Africa and then back up to England. England could now say that they were the second country to circumnavigate the globe. Now, interesting enough, when it comes to Ferdinand Magellan, this is when he gets into a little trouble. Okay, so Sir Francis Drake gets knighted for what he did. That was 1581. So that's why he became Sir Francis Drake. He wasn't Sir Francis Drake before that. His ship was called the Golden Hind. Now, he achieved circumnavigation, but what happened soon afterwards? Okay, so he went back to raiding Spanish ships. So did he actually have a turn of conscience about privatization? Again, not pirating because he's commissioned by the Spanish government. No. Was he against slavery? Good chance from some of his writings. So, okay, you can't win them all. He's still a pirate, privateer, pirate, whatever. Okay, 1587, he raids Cadiz. Now, interesting enough, Drake launches a preemptive strike against the Spanish Armada. Now, what's interesting about this is actually in Spain, and he destroys numerous ships. So what is happening? Okay, so during this point, there are all these privateers. There's all these people from England, from France, from other countries taking over the Spanish ships, and they're losing a lot of ships. So the Spanish Armada is put together. What is the Spanish Armada? The Spanish Armada is a group of vessels, a group of sailing ships, large ones mostly, who were supposed to go out and save the ships. Well, then they decided that they were going to go up to England. England finds out about this. So what do? They sent Sir Francis Drake down over to that port, Cadiz, and blew them all to smithereens as much as possible, as much as he could. Then he booked it out of there as fast as he could because the Armada was not ready to head out. But at that point, they basically decided, hey, we should have gone out. But because of that, they actually had to wait a little bit. So in 1588, 1 year later, Drake served as a second command of the English fleet to fight off the Spanish Armada. Again, he had just blown up a bunch of the Spanish Armada. So yeah, they were pretty ticked at him. So they went up to England instead of going west to defend the ships. So yes, this was some interesting back and forth. Now, Drake and his oldest companion, which was John Hawkins, as you know, led one more expedition. So they wanted to go across into the Caribbean again and be privateers again. So they went over and attacked some Spanish settlements and treasure ships. The mission was unsuccessful. Both Drake and Hawkins fell ill during the campaign. They did get some treasure, but not as much as they wanted to, and they headed back to, actually not to England, they headed to Panama. They headed for land because of dysentery. They were sick. They were throwing up. They had all these different ailments, so they thought bringing him into land might help, except that he died of dysentery. Yep. So he died of dysentery on the coast of Panama. And then he was buried, and this is interesting, at sea, so where they dumped the coffin. He was dumped in a coffin full of lead, which is usually cannonballs. I don't know if it's actually cannonballs because it only says lead. But I'll have to do some more looking at that. But they filled it with lead so that it did not float. And this is basically where he spent most of his time raiding ships, the Spanish ships. Again, because they were coming back from the Aztec, the Maya, I think the Inca at the time, bringing back all this gold from those different civilizations. And so they attacked as much as they could. Well, okay, so Sir Francis Drake is now dead. What happened before Sir Francis Drake died, but basically nearing the end of his life? Another person came into play. His name was Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, again, he was Walter Raleigh. Mr. Walter, who are you? Walter was born in England, and he came from a well-connected Protestant family. Now, these families, being Protestant, being very religious, were actually very friendly with the French Huguenots, and they actually fought for them during the French War of Religion. This is when the British like to mingle some of their influence into other people's wars. So the military experience was great for him, and he became more well-liked and given commissions by the English. So, next one, his first real voyage was actually with Sir Humphrey Gilbert. Now, Sir Humphrey Gilbert was actually supposed to travel around to North America. Now, the voyage was part of a early English effort to explore and settle New England, the New World, but in the New England area. Though it was unsuccessful completely. It just, at that point though, it sparked Raleigh's interest in colonization and spreading England. So, but before he could do that, there was a Irish rebellion against England. And so Raleigh was put in charge of sequestering, putting a stop to that. So he went over to Munster, Ireland, and he gained notoriety for his role, became famous for his role in the brutal succession of the rebellion. Okay, so this solidified his place in England. They loved him at that point. So, what did he do after that? Well, he said, I want to settle North America. And he said that to Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth said, you served us well, and for that, we will give you this commission. Now, it was called a charter, or also called a patent. He was given permission to go across and settle the first English settlement. And so he led, not in person, he led the first group of settlers to go to Roanoke Island, which is off of modern-day North Carolina. The colony struggled immensely. They had a very hard time, and it eventually failed. But this was England's first serious attempt at a settlement. So what happened? Well, 2 years later, they sent people back to the exact same place. This time it was with John White. John White established a colony there. Upon returning to the colony in 1590, so 3 years later, because he went back to get more supplies, he found that it was abandoned, gone, disappeared, removed. And there was actually something carved into one of the trees. It was called, not Creo, Croatoa. Now, this saying, they thought meant that that's where the settlers actually moved to when they left that area. Now, the area was not very good for settlers. So this was actually a failure for him. So Raleigh, still in England, well, he decides unwisely to marry one of Queen Elizabeth's maids of honor. This is one of the people that are supposed to be helping out Queen Elizabeth and supposed to be completely devoted to her. But, yeah, she wasn't. And she was mostly devoted to her husband, or who would become her husband. And so Walter Raleigh, actually at this point he would be Sir Walter Raleigh. I think he was knighted when he helped out with the rebellion against Ireland. But he was thrown in the Tower of London because the Queen discovered their marriage. And it wasn't just the fact that they got married, it was the fact that they tried to keep it secret. So she wanted to teach him a lesson and threw him in jail. So, and the Tower of London was not a pretty place to be. I've always wanted to visit there. That might be another place to go visit for one of these expeditions. Okay, So that was in 1592. 1595, he was released, and he was allowed to go on another expedition to South America. Now, remember, where was South America, or who owned South America? Now, this was a mixture of Spanish for everything west of Brazil, or at least west of the line for the Treaty of Tordesillas. The Portuguese had everything that was east of it. Now, inland was a little bit different. That's why Brazil was able to expand. Well, he came over to South America and he attacked. He was actually trying to find El Dorado, the city of gold. Supposedly was located in this one area in Venezuela. Well, it wasn't. And well, in 1596, he participated in a naval expedition against the Spanish, which he was not supposed to, as there was a treaty in place, including the capture of, and it was unsuccessful. Well, of course it was unsuccessful, and he was not able to capture any gold. He was going to try to privateer. Now, because of this, and because Queen Elizabeth's passing. Now, Queen Elizabeth, again, had a soft spot in her heart. Even though he did marry one of her maids of honor, she still did. But when she died, okay, then it was King James the First. King James did not like Raleigh. They were not in favor, and he was implicated in the main plot, a conspiracy against the new king, and was sentenced to death. Okay, so Sir Walter Raleigh, probably stripped that name, or was probably stripped by that name. His name was probably stripped, the Sir part, the knighthood was probably stripped. What happened? He found himself back in the Tower of London. Okay, so he's back in London. Oh, man, seriously? I'm back here. This time it wasn't really supposed to be for a temporary stay, for marrying someone that was Queen Elizabeth's maid of honor. No, this was actually for 13 years. Now, Raleigh was released from the tower and was given the ability to go one more time to El Dorado, again, by King James. So he gave him one more time. I think it was more that King James just wanted to get rid of him. He was like, you know what? I want you out of the tower. You're causing quite a stir. I want you out of here. Get going. And I will give you a commission to go across and find your city of gold. I don't think he actually thought there was a city of gold. But what he did do, because there was a treaty, and actually the first time I don't think there was a treaty when he attacked the Spanish there. But what he did do, and actually, you know what? I have a question here. Where is Cadiz? Because I said it was in Spain, and I was actually kind of sure it was. Yes, it is in Cadiz. Okay, it is in Spain. Sorry, I just had this epiphany that I was telling the wrong thing. But Cadiz is in Spain. It is a port. It's one of the large ports in Spain, and it's right off the tip near the ports of Gibraltar, the Straits of Gibraltar, which is basically where the Mediterranean, Spain meets up with North Africa as you enter into the Mediterranean. So Cadiz was that main port where the Spanish Armada was attacked by Sir Francis Drake. Okay, now going back to Sir Walter Raleigh. And the reason why I did that is because I needed to make sure that I wasn't telling you false information. Sometimes I get these thoughts that just say, you know what, you need to check that. And I've had this things telling me, you need to check this. I'm glad I did. And we were right. Okay, so he was released from prison. He was sent to go find it. Now, here's the thing. They were, at that point, under a treaty with Spain. We will not attack any of your ports. We just want to find the city of El Dorado. Well, once they get to South America, they actually attack a Spanish outpost. Now, interesting enough, it was not actually Sir Walter Raleigh because he was sick. So he actually stayed behind on another ship while the other ships attacked San Thome, Thome, with a tilde above it. So because of this, and because they were under a treaty with Spain, as soon as he returned, well, actually before he returned home, his son was actually on the ship that attacked the Spanish port and died. And because of this, Sir Walter Raleigh basically lost the will to live. And he did not commit suicide, as some have said. I've seen people say that he committed suicide. No, he actually went back. The Spanish ambassador actually demanded King James punish Raleigh for violating the treaty in order to keep that diplomatic relationship with Spain. Raleigh was sentenced to death. And you know what? I don't think Raleigh even cared. After his son had died because of the battle, and who knows, did Raleigh want them to battle? I don't know. He was sick at the time. Very sick. But of course, Raleigh probably wanted some gold to bring home. So who knows? But at this point, in 1618, and this is again, he left on the expedition. The final expedition was 1616. After 13 years being in prison, brought his son with him. And because his son passed away, lost all will to live. I mean, I don't even know if his wife was still alive at this point. I can find that out. But because of that, he decided, you know what, I'm done with life. And he accepted his will, and he was executed in 1618. So this is a sad story for Sir Walter Raleigh. And sorry, these pictures have not kept up with me. Okay, so this is Sir Walter Raleigh. And as I said, there was no really good images of his trips. So these are just some of the trips that he helped manage from England. This is, again, not his trips, all of them. These are trips that he managed from England. And if you can't see it, don't worry. It's just all these back and forth from all these different places all across the Caribbean, South America, and North America. But this is basically the best map I had for Sir Walter Raleigh. It's a sad life for both of those guys. They had great expeditions. They both found thrown into the Tower of London for well, no, I don't think Sir Francis Drake did. Sir Walter Raleigh did. But they both were found doing things that were not very much above board as we see them. But if you really look at it, to them, it wasn't as wrong as they would have thought. Because in their eyes, some of those things were necessary. As part of war, you attack your opponent's ships. And if you're attacking opponent's ships and there's gold on there, you might as well bring it back. That's just the way it is. You sought after ways of crippling the other European nation, which would be taking their gold and revenue from them as they try to bring them back from the Americas. Now, again, they were stealing them from other people. Were Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake stealing them from the Aztecs? No. Were they stealing from the Mayas? Nope. Were they stealing them from the Incas? Nope. They were stealing them from the Spanish. So we might say that it's wrong to be a pirate. At the same time, in their eyes, not so much. We don't ever want to condone stealing. But it's an interesting place when you're back then fighting for a country against another country. The military does things that they're asked to do that you wouldn't want to do at home, especially the ones on the things on the battlefield that they do. So these are the types of things that you have to be able to see it from other people's perspectives. So as a last little learning lesson, as you'll find this in the curriculum, but this just happened to me yesterday. I was sitting around with a group of people and talking about basically opposition in all things. And we were talking about how, say you're driving on the road and you're cut off. Someone pulls right in front of you and you swerve just to not allow them to hit you. Or say they come up to you really fast from behind, like they did with me earlier in the week, and almost hit your car because they're going way too fast and you're trying to get into the lane next to the lane that you're at. Well, okay, so you might get mad. But can that person make you mad? No, they can't. You're the one that controls your anger. And so one way that I've been able to overcome my anger issues when it comes to someone cutting me off, someone doing things against me, is I've actually started to look at their perspective. This is something that is very big in history. One of the greatest lessons that you can learn is learning to see things in the perspective of the other people. Now, you also want to see it in your perspective and with the lens that you have and how things might be wrong, because you want to learn from their mistakes. But learning how other people saw things is actually one of the greatest lessons that you will learn from history. If you only see things from your eye perspective, you won't learn the things that are the most important about history. If you try to understand what other people went through, the reason why people did certain things, you start to understand a larger picture. And then at that point, then you can make your decisions on, you know what, I won't ever do what they did because I know it's wrong, or I know it hurts people, or I know whatever you decide. But being able to see things from perspectives allows you to have empathy for others. I have empathy for those that were in the slave trade, not because I ever went into the slave trade, but because I tried to understand what they went through. I have deep respect for the explorers that went west into finding other parts of the world that they might have thought they might be falling off the face of the planet if they went straight west from Europe. I have deep respect for all those people that lived in the past that did great things as we see it today. And I have empathy for those that did evil things or wrong things as we see it today. I have empathy. I feel sorry for them because they will, in the end, have to account for their actions. Like people say, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So at this point, I hope you're able to learn something from these two people, Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh. Both of them did things that you wouldn't say as the best of things. But at the same time, if you can see it from their perspective, you can have some understanding as to reasons why things happen. And because things happen like that, then you understand history. And if you understand history, you're less likely to repeat it. Thank you so much for joining me on this great Adventure Box podcast day, and we will catch you next time. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.